It was the year 1989 in Soviet Estonia. 2 years before the collapse of the Soviet Union, and right in the middle of the singing revolution, that I was born into this world. I grew up with the stories of how my family members were a part of these amazingly brave and beautiful events that led to the restoration of independence of our home country, Estonia. And I would always get chills listening to these stories. And I still tear up every time I think about these events. Later on in my life, as a kid in Free Estonia, I would go to song festivals, even though I'm a terrible singer. But I would always go there to try to experience the same feeling of being a true Estonian. And I would ask my mom if these song festivals were anything like the night song festivals during the singing revolution. And she would always say that it's similar, but not the same. So I've always had the feeling that I missed out on something big. I will never experience the feeling of standing up for what you believe in together with the whole nation side by side. My father was in the Baltic Way, the human chain of about 1 million people running across Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And these people there were potentially risking their lives for our freedom, for something bigger than themselves. And I was a 3-month-old baby doing pretty much nothing. So I've grown up feeling extremely grateful to the generation who fought for our freedom, but at the same time envying my parents for being there and wishing that I had been a part of this revolution. Little did I know that the revolution of my lifetime is yet to come. But this time, it's not about countries or nations. It's about the entire humankind. And this time, it's not about freedom, but survival. And this time, we are not fighting against an external intruder. We are fighting against ourselves. The threat of collapsing the natural ecosystem around us is real. The ecosystem that provides us with the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, is at risk. Because we, humans, are destroying it every single day. In just 40 years, a bit more than my lifetime, a forest area the size of Europe has been lost forever. And if we continue at this pace, all of the world's rainforests will be wiped off of this planet completely and irreversibly in less than 80 years. That's in one single human generation. So the children born today are quite likely to see that day, if, of course, the ecosystem as a whole has not collapsed by the time. My children were already born into a world with 30% less wildlife than in the year that I was born, and 70% less than in the year my parents were born. And this causes a phenomenon known as the shifting baseline syndrome. The less biodiversity we are used to having around us, the lower our nature protection goals become. Because we don't set our baselines based on what was normal to our parents or grandparents. We set our baseline based on the little we have known. Biodiversity loss and climate change are some of the biggest risks to our life on this planet. If the temperature becomes too hot, or if we lose the bees that pollinate our crops, this planet becomes inhabitable for us humans, and we die. And the bad news is that we ourselves are destroying the ecosystem that is keeping us alive. By emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and heating up the planet, and by destroying nature with intensive land use, like cutting down forests, digging up wetlands, degrading our soils and croplands. Now, the good news is that if we are to blame for all of this, then we can fix this as well. And I know how. To solve a global problem like this, we need to turn to the one thing that makes the world go around: money. So the first part of the solution is starting to value nature for more than just raw material. Because today, the only way for a landowner to earn money from their natural resources is by selling raw material, like timber from forests, peat from peatlands. And there are basically no financially feasible alternatives to that. And if we pay landowners only for destroying nature, then destruction is what we get. But nature is so much more than just raw material. But we are not used to paying for the ecosystem services that we all consume every day, including air, water, food. And now you might think that, wait a minute, I do pay for my water and food. But what you're paying for is the extraction of these resources and not the maintenance of these ecosystem services. We don't pay wetland owners for keeping the water cycles functioning on this planet. Nor do we pay forest or grassland owners for protecting the habitats of bees and other pollinators that enable farmers to grow us food in the first place. So the first part of the solution is paying landowners for protecting and maintaining the ecosystem that makes this planet habitable for us humans. The second part of the solution is shifting the way we assign financial value to everything around us. Today, the financial value of the products and services that we consume mostly reflects the costs that went into destroying something. We compensate for the extraction of raw material and the human labor that went into producing something out of it. So, for example, when you buy a plane ticket, you compensate for the costs of digging out fossil fuels to fly the plane from one place to another. The big problem is that there is more and more money in this world to be used for destruction. Since money was detached from gold in the 1930s, there is basically no limit to how much money we can have on this world. But nature is limited. We can only have as much of it as it is physically possible on this planet. And with an ever-increasing amount of money, we have built ourselves an economic system that will eventually end with a huge amount of money and no nature. And this will mean the end of us humans as well. So the second part of the solution is turning the economy upside down. We need to shift from a world that is based on economic growth to a world where the economy is based on how much nature can provide us with. How do we do that? Imagine a world where the amount of money that we have is directly connected to the amount of intact nature on this planet. The more nature we have, the richer we are. The more of it we destroy, the less wealthier we become. How does that sound for an incentive for humans to start protecting nature? I have spent 2 years on building a financial system like this at Single Earth. To enable this, we're building a digital twin of the world's nature. Everything that nature does in the physical world, we represent in the digital world. By using satellite data, big data analysis, and machine learning, we can build global carbon, biodiversity, and other ecosystem services models that describe how nature works. Because although we have thousands of satellites orbiting around the Earth, nobody has ever described what nature does on a scale like this ever before. And based on these global models, we start emitting tokens for every 100 kilograms of carbon dioxide captured in biodiverse nature. By packaging all ecosystem services around one common unit, like carbon sequestration, we can tackle climate and biodiversity goals together. Landowners continue receiving these tokens for as long as they keep their nature intact. And as these tokens become usable as a currency, they receive a huge incentive to keep nature intact, to be able to continue minting money. The money itself can be used in exchange for goods and services like any other currency, except for the fact that this time, money is now attached to the protection of nature and not the destruction of it. So, who is responsible for shifting to a new financial system like this? The governments? Businesses? People like us? As much as I want to believe in the governments and businesses' willingness to take action, then knowing that they are at the same time continuing oil exploration and investing huge amounts of money into developing the fossil fuel industry, I find it hard to place all my bets on them. And that leaves it on us. You, me, every single person has the power to shift to a new nature-backed economy. We are the economy. And this is the revolution of our lifetime. Thank you.